Hi, my name is Rebecca Lee, and I co-wrote this book, The Mercury Detoxification Manual, with Andy Cutler, PhD, who should have got a Nobel Prize for what he figured out. The book explains step by step how to get heavy metals, particularly mercury, out of your body without injuring yourself, which is very easy to do. Chronic mercury toxicity, although largely undiagnosed, is epidemic in the United States and probably in the world too. It is arguably the root cause behind most of the idiopathic chronic problems we see virtually everywhere these days.
I'm ready.
I'll say good morning. So the Friday morning crew is back, although it's only Thursday, and it's hard to get everyone together at the same time because both of these ladies have children with complicated issues, and both of them homeschool, and both of them raise chickens. So we are here today to discuss heavy metal poisoning and how to fix it by using the Andy Cutler protocol of frequent low-dose chelation. It's a very common problem, especially among children, and is extremely poorly understood. And so this is important material we are discussing here. If you appreciate this discussion, please subscribe, like, and share. There are a whole lot of people suffering out there who could get worlds better, so let's get this information out to them. So last week, Brittany was going to tell her story, but her youngest was sick, so they put the kibosh on that. But here she is today, and although she had to get up really early and go sit in her car to do this. So Brittany is a homeschooling mom of 3 boys, 2 of which are on the spectrum, and 1 of whom is seriously autistic. She discovered the Andy Cutler protocol through a friend in 2018 and has been working on recovering her kids and herself ever since. She has seen social improvement in her older children and great improvement in language development in her severely autistic child. Sandra is an Army wife. Her hubby retired 6 years ago, but the military years were formative in many ways. She's the mother of 3 boys. 9 years ago, she figured out that her children had symptoms of heavy metal toxicity, discovered the Andy Cutler protocol shortly thereafter, and has brought them from being ill to being whole and healthy again, all by herself. She is also chelating herself, and she is homeschooled for the past 12 years. She is a national board certified health and wellness coach and offers consultations at chelationcoach.com. So Brittany, since we have managed to get you here, please tell us your story. How did your children get injured? How did you find out about Andy Cutler chelation, and how has it been going? And anything else you'd like to tell us? So you've got the floor, Brittany.
So my oldest son is 14, and at 2.5, he received a Prevnar vaccine booster, according to the doctor, that caused absence seizures several hours later. And then by the next day, all the language skills were gone. Behavior issues showed up, and we were just left feeling like nothing was wrong. The doctor said, no, that wasn't what happened. These seizures just happened, but he had no history.
How old was he?
He was 2.5.
Okay, go on.
And so at the same time when he had gotten those vaccines, my middle son was receiving his 2-month vaccines, and so that's where we stopped. He received his 2-month vaccines and never received another vaccine again. And so we had to go through all the county help to get the speech therapy and the ABA therapy. And while he is a very high functioning autism, you can still tell there's something, just a little off. And that's where I know the metals are playing a part in that. And my youngest son is 7, and we're not sure when in his development the regression started. We don't really recall. But it was vaccines at some point, probably between 9 and 12 months. Unfortunately, my now husband wanted vaccines. As much as I protested and told him, he's like, well, maybe if we just do them 1 at a time, it won't be as bad. And I'm like, okay, we did them 1 at a time until the regression happened. I'm like, see, now here we are. We have another child just like the first one. And so it took us a while You know, the regression was different for my third son than it was for my first son. He was still, you know, he still was trying to talk, but you could tell there was just something off and a little not you know, developmentally appropriate or correct for his age. And it went downhill instead of uphill, like a, you know, an infant and a toddler should be developing. And so at about 2.5 to 3, we realized there's no language development. It was just more noise and crying, and it was behaviors more than anything else. We didn't go anywhere. We didn't take him anywhere. And I felt like I was back in the same place as I was with my oldest son, just chaos. And the difference for this child is nothing was helping. Speech therapy, he didn't care. You know, behavior therapies, he didn't care. He didn't want to be any part of it. So I could tell that this child was more toxic than the first one was. I don't know if maybe his father has different genetic factors that have played into this that my oldest son doesn't have. I don't have any of those genetic mutations, those MTHFR things. So their fathers may or may not be contributors that make this a whole lot harder. But my youngest son has it the worst right now. He probably has 50 words and he's almost 8. And he doesn't speak in more than 2 to 3 word sentences still.
So this is
But
the
that's a
one
lot.
this is the one where you say severely autistic. That's the one you're referring to.
Yeah, my
Yeah.
youngest son is my severely autistic. Very minimal language.
Ear infections, true. The last,
Yes.
yeah.
Yeah, he did have like the double ear infections as a 18 months to 3 years where they're just constantly getting ear infections. He had all of that. And so, yeah, so no therapies were helping. But now, you know, now that we've started ACC, I want to say just within a few rounds of starting ACC, there was just language that you could tell he understood what he was saying, and it wasn't just what is it, echolalia. It wasn't just like repeating things he heard. Like he was using words and short 2-word phrases in context, and then that's not anything we ever saw with speech therapy. And he still doesn't respond very well to speech therapy right now. So I know that metals are
Right.
95% of the reason, and the places that they came from, like the vaccines or from my amalgam. I had amalgam.
You had amalgam at the time?
I
Yeah.
did. All 3 of my children. Yeah.
Yeah. So how did you figure out about heavy? You said a friend told you about it, huh?
Yeah, homeschooling friend. We were on a field trip one day and we made a new friend, and she's like, she saw my youngest son and she's like, "Oh, I know exactly where you need to be." She introduced me to, I don't know which group it was then. I want to say it was the children's group, the last children's group. And then I found,
Yeah.
yeah, and then the adult group after, and I sat around for a very long time, just observing the group. I don't know if I was afraid or if I was unsure. Or I was so toxic myself, I didn't know what to do.
Right.
A little bit of all of that, probably.
I realized I tried to chelate them back in 2018 when I found the group originally, and I was so toxic myself I couldn't even deal with them. I couldn't chelate them. I couldn't get their vitamins together. I was so toxic on my own that it wasn't possible for. It took me a couple years to realize, okay, I need to go deal with my own dental issues and at least get myself started so that I can function in a way that I can deal with them also.
Like
Right.
putting on the oxygen mask first, as we
Yes.
tend to. Yeah. How many amalgams did you have?
I had at least 3. I had extensive oral surgery to have all of it dealt with.
Yeah. So you went and you got your teeth fixed, and then you start chelating yourself. And how did that go? What happened?
It was amazing, honestly. I got on, you know, the core supplements before. The dental surgery required over 2 months of recovery. It was extensive and a lot. And
What was going on? Were the fillings way down into the root?
I had the root canals removed.
What?
I had the root canals removed.
Oh, okay.
They had the you know, the metal filling in them, and and there were cavitations underneath, and Dennis is like, let's just go take the whole thing. And it was life-changing. They needed to come out. They were infected at the root, and so
So you were
but
one
what
of the lucky people that felt better right after doing the
I did not feel good. I did not feel good. But yeah, I felt my health felt better. It took a lot of healing to get to a place where I could chelate, because I couldn't put things in my mouth.
Right, everything's sore.
But it was, I mean, it was amazing. The core four was great, but ACE was I'm a big advocate of ACE. If anyone sees me in the group, I'm big on pushing people, take more, take more, take more.
That's adrenal cortex for people who don't know, which is the miracle supplement that we use. And you usually wind up getting all our crazy family on it in the long run, because it works so dramatically that people tend to use, people like it, even if they don't accept that they're poisoned or that they need to chelate or anything like that. It just helps a lot for everything. Yeah.
Yeah, it was amazing. I think I lost 30 pounds really quickly. I could tell that my cortisol was really up,
You
and
lost 30 pounds just from using adrenal cortex?
yeah.
I have a few people, I wish I could get them to listen to me about that. Jeez.
Yeah. And then the devil showed up.
I've seen that people who are under stress and are tired all the time, I just noticed this recently with somebody who's got a weight problem, is they're constantly attracted to food. And I think it's just to get a little
Carbs.
energy, like they're so tired, they're so exhausted that just, they just, especially sweets, it's going to give them a little oomph.
Low cortisol is followed by low blood sugar. When your blood sugar is low, you really crave the high carb foods to just get a little bit of energy. And so it's a nasty roller coaster, because you also get the hangries when the blood sugar trails and the cortisol is low. It's like, and your inflammation is dysregulated. So it's this and then the fact alone that cortisol gives you anxiety. So emotional eating can be a thing that is like outside of your conscious control in that moment. You're just like, and like I think it's almost like it's all kinds of interlinked of what we learned and whatnot. But then the biochemistry between cortisol being low, biology low, is like, I mean, when they talk about, diabetics and high cortisol, well, but it's in the cell, so it's a problem. For us, it's blood sugar tends to run low, and then you really crave the really sticky sweet stuff just to get something in your blood, because you're like, you're running on something, and the adrenaline just to keep you going. I mean, your body just tries to figure.
It produces adrenaline, even when the mercury blocks the cortisol production, but it doesn't block the adrenaline at all. Now Sandra's disappeared now. Let's hope she makes it back.
I'm here.
Oh, there you are. Okay. All right. Well, tell us, Brittany, tell us what happened with your kids. Did you start chelating all three of them? So you've got one that's seriously autistic and two old ones, something's wrong, but not so bad. Am I understanding that correctly?
Yeah, so the little one is the most autistic. My oldest son is extremely high functioning.
Okay.
And my middle child is an anxiety basket case.
An anxiety basket case. Yeah.
It's bad.
A couple of them too.
Really bad. My husband's on a business trip right now, and my middle son is just constant. Is the garage door closed? Are the doors locked? Can I go check? I'm like, please take some ACE. Please take some Melissa lemon balm. Please take some theanine. Please calm down. So yeah, he's always worried about something, and he's a toe walker, so he's a little off, but he's not autistic. He's neurotypical for his age, aside from those issues.
And have they improved somewhat? He's still suffering a lot from the anxiety. Yeah.
We're on round. We've been on round this week, and he's just like, he'll go and find the calming vitamins and take more. He's like, "Can I take more?" I'm like, "Please take as much as you want." Because you're giving me anxiety, and I'm not an anxiety-ridden person as much anymore. It's very much under control now. So helping him deal with his, I think, is he's he's at least aware. I appreciate his self-awareness
That's
because
huge.
That's huge. Yeah.
so yeah, my oldest son, he's shown, I think, the least progress just because his issues are social. But he's more interested in socializing with other children his age, which is, it's a good step in the right direction, and I may need to just really take a jump in his dose because he's considered an adult full size.
Okay, so what are they using? Lipoic acid?
Say, I don't DMSA them all as often as I do for myself because it causes all the yeast issues
Yes.
that create more issues than I want to deal with.
Well, yeah, and you don't need to. So I did my whole thing with just lipoic acid the whole time, and now I'm starting to think that maybe there's some lead there, so I'm doing some DMSA. Yeah.
I combo all my own rounds. I DMSA all my rounds.
Okay. Do you think you were exposed to lead when
So
in the past?
Possibly.
Possibly.
I'm not sure, but it feels better in a combo than it does with lipoic by itself.
The proof is in the
okay,
pudding.
it smooths it out.
What are you gonna say, Sandra? Are you gonna say that proof is in the pudding?
I wanted to kind of hook into, you said that the DMSA alone, you're leery because of how it stirs up yeast. Have you found a combination that, or a high enough dose of whatever antifungal that keeps the yeast at bay so you can reap the benefits without the yeast flare?
Yeah, we actually just recently added Golden Seal, and it's taking what's like left after. I think the little one uses Pau d'Arco because he's a phenol intolerant. And so the Golden Seal has kind of picked up the slack at the end. I think it's just certain times of the day where tiredness is setting in, and then his behavior issues on their own. Just some days are hard, and I feel like you can do a DMSA round once or twice, but by the time you get to the third round, you've already taxed
Yeah.
body to a point where you have.
DMSA can lower neutrophils. So if he's already the one with the history of the frequent ear infections, the immune system is already very in a kind of a more fragile state, let's put it that way, compared to your other kids, then maybe DMSA is not something you want to do, back to back to back, and just once a month for him, and
Until he's
because
more healed.
the combo round's given on the same schedule as the ALA anyway. So if you just segregate and he only gets ALA, would that be an option to see if it helps? And then the other thing I'm thinking is you can always add neutrophil boosting supplements, from lithium to taurine to, we've got a couple there in our bag of tricks kind of thing, where you can say, okay, there's even a neutrophil plus. There used to be a supplement that was.
It used to be, yeah.
Yeah, I don't know if it still exists, but it always that's in my head. Like, there are things you can do to counter what you're seeing, so you're not just avoiding what really helps your kid in the long run, but to move through it without dreading, oh my God, here's the DMSA again. I know what I'm up for. It's like, no, just what do we need to do to mitigate, balance out minimize the negative side effects, and bump up the good stuff we want.
A lot of kids don't have lead. Not like, it seems like all of them have mercury. But
I think both coasts and lots of anybody from Asia, there's lead. It's just, it may not be to the degree of, oh, they were a year old and, ended up in the hospital for IV chelation, but it's still there. I think it's very much still a problem. It's just, we don't have the public awareness. It's not a public health kind of issue. There used to be the big lead awareness thing. I think it's in October. There's like a whole week where, billboards and this and public ad.
Lead awareness week.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, lead poisoning, or there are, but I think it's waning. And then, if you say Flint, everybody knows, but it's
Yeah,
not just Flint, Michigan, because those old pipes are on both coasts,
they're everywhere. Yeah,
and those
that's true.
service
You know,
lines
it gets
haven't been
me the
replaced.
most about, everything coming out of in Flint, Michigan, and how like it was a big scandal and they were all talking about it, is this belief that lead poisoning and that's it. No improvement can be made, and those kids are just doomed.
Yeah.
That is that is the medical belief. My chiropractor said it. I said,
Hmm.
it's not true.
It's medical standard that you can, not recoup
Yeah,
the
you can't do
IQ
anything. They're
loss,
always
this
gonna
and that.
be, like at risk of going to the penitentiary because they're lead poisoned. No,
Right.
that's just not
And
true.
the violent criminals. Yeah.
You can chelate those kids and they get better. And you're proof of that.
Hmm.
Same, yeah.
Absolutely.
I would mention Blood Safe Mama here. Chelate your children for God's sakes.
She, I think, is married to the idea this is part of our identity. It made her an advocate. I'm like, okay,
Advocate.
I've identified the problem. Now what's next? I wanted to know, why is this happening? What, first I wanted to know what caused it. And I had an idea of the exposure. And the second thing was, how do we go forward? As in, I'm not getting stuck here, oh, poor child, poor me with the poor child. It was, what next? There is no just getting stuck in the mud. There's,
We're
yes,
not.
I'm angry. Yes, I'm furious. Oh my God, I didn't know how bad this was, to, okay, what can we do about it?
Well, it's also quite a kind of a mental state where you're capable of not accepting, like going for, okay, the doctors all say this and all the scientists say this and everybody says this, but I'm just
My
not gonna accept
skepticism
that.
probably helped me
I'm gonna
already.
find out for myself.
You're right, because with my oldest, I didn't get help from the traditional medical side. They minimized my concerns about the developmental delays of my oldest. So I was already on the way out the door with allopathic medicine and just mainstream, because they didn't even acknowledge what I saw. And it wasn't just what I saw, it's what I saw observing other kids, and my own was different. So I was already like, okay, they're not validating what I know about my oldest. Here's my middle one bouncing off the walls, already have an awareness of the exposure to lead we had. And then it was an easy thing to say, okay, we're dealing with acute exposure of mercury in utero, acute exposure as a teeny tiny 17 to 24-month-old child, young child, constantly on the ground, still putting stuff in their faces. Arsenic in the environment where we lived for several years. So it was like 1, 2, 3. It was this holy trifecta of holy moly, I'm like, yeah, no wonder the kid is kind of going sideways developmentally, because his body's not supposed to have any of this inside of him. And
Not.
when I came with that, knowing these bits and pieces, it made sense to me with how coherent Andy explained things, that, oh, if this man says that the lead is chelated, you have the gradient from higher lead concentration in the brain. If you lower the body compartment, it'll trickle out of the brain over time, because DMSA does not cross the blood-brain barrier to our knowledge, so that it's just going through the calcium channels, because it's a lead and calcium are bioequivalents and the body handles it the same. Although lead will like block certain things where it just stays longer than calcium would, but it was just an easy thing from, oh, we're chelating mercury and arsenic with ALA. Oh, and DMSA takes care of the lead. It was like, holy moly, I need this, I mean, from learning about it, reading about it for the first time online, ordering the book, to starting chelation and starting the core 4 was like 3 weeks, 2.5 to 3 weeks. I just told my husband a short outline. We went on a little weekend getaway, and I talked probably more about Mercury than anything else over lunch stuff, over meal times and free time. And then we just got started because
I'm
what did
doing,
I have to lose? Really, that was my feeling at the time. I'm like, the kid is behind in so many things, scholastic, social skills. I'm like, I have nothing to lose. If this doesn't work, well, I can't say I didn't try. And I had so much faith
all
that,
the
hey,
time.
I'm
You got
reading
nothing
this.
to
I'm like,
lose.
oh my God, that's my kid, and that's my kid. And then all these things happen, the improvements happen. And you said your oldest, you saw the smallest amount of progress. With my oldest, I saw the physical stuff. It was the toe walking, it was the um sensory things that improved before the actual things like eye contact or coming in a room and greeting somebody. When he came into a room, he came out of his room, turned right to the hallway. There was a long hallway, and pretty much right across the hallway was a different door. And I was in there on a corner desk, and he popped his head. He came out of his room and just popped his head in quickly and said hello, even though I was facing the corner in that room. And I just turned back and I'm like, hey, Paul. And in my heart, it was like, we're over the top. He actually sees
Like, Mom,
people
I
now.
love you. That we hear
It
from
was
some
like
people.
2.5 years or more into chelation. It was this tiniest, subtlest thing, right? But I'm
Two
like, yes.
and a half.
Earlier, I was like, yes, yes, yes.
It
And
took
trying to
22
play it
years
cool.
to get
I'm
that.
like,
You need to be
wow.
patient.
And he still does to this day. I mean, he goes in a room. We greet each other. And I've done that before he reached this level of reciprocation, right? So when that happened, I was like, yes, I know we're on the right track. You know, we've gone through so many things, but that was this tiniest thing where, you know, other people will comment how he's the most respectful, young, whatever. It was, you know, through teenage years, all of this adults
Those
appreciate.
pictures of him getting driving his truck, and I thought, oh, that's a nice looking boy. He looks like he can handle that truck and follow the road.
Absolutely. I am not worried about that kid. He's the oldest, he's the most responsible, and just put him on a track and there he goes. Yes.
How long have you been doing this, Brittany, with your kids?
I think about a year consistently. I don't count the maybe dozen rounds we did back in 2018 where I couldn't deal with it. But I do believe that they all got to do their stall phase in the time that we stopped. So we're
Okay.
not having that.
That must have been a hard time.
It was. And looking back now, it was. My youngest had a really hard stall phase because we went through a period of a year and a half maybe where he couldn't go anywhere. I remember going to we have like a lagoon where the kids can play in the water out here, and he cried and cried and screamed and cried because he didn't want to get out of the water. And looking back now, I'm like, oh my goodness, he was in the middle of his stall phase and I had no idea.
Yeah, the hard time transitioning.
Horrible.
So the stall
Horrible.
phase is something that's particular to Mercury, in case people listening don't know. It's particular to Mercury detox. And when the extracellular mercury level gets lower than the intracellular mercury level, the mercury will tend to come out of the organs and cells into the blood and cause more symptoms. So mercury is the only poison that when you get it out of your body, you get better for a while. And then you go through a period of stalling or feeling worse, and then you start getting better again. Yeah. So you know that you're dealing with mercury if you go through that. Because it's hard to figure out. And there's no real tests for this stuff. How much you've got, how much you started with, how much you got out, how much you've got now. There's none of that. You have to go by symptoms and the footprint that this
The clues it leaves. You kind of look at the breadcrumbs of what symptoms are no longer there.
Your test is only like sometimes it's pretty informative, can be informative, I believe is how Andy used to put it. Informative. Sometimes it's not informative at all. But you know, these people show up in our groups and they've got, you know, like all these symptoms. I can't think, I mean, what else is it but mercury? It quacks like a duck, looks like a duck. It's a duck. Yeah.
I mean, I came to this thinking, and I had a diagnosis of congenital adrenal hyperplasia, and I talked about it before, where, I checked all the boxes for that, history and current symptoms, where Andy himself had already figured out that for women, this diagnosis, the clinical diagnosis, where the genetics don't match a supposedly congenital condition, like something was up there. So I'm like, well, my kid has this. I have these symptoms, but I thought they were called something else, and the treatment was helping some. So it was a bit confusing for a while for my identity. And it's like, oh, I thought I had this, but oh, actually it's Mercury. So it's, there's so many things that can cause, the nervous system. It can touch you from head to toe, literally. The dry, itchy skin around the ankles, the frequent fungal infections, your immune system is out of whack. You can have allergies, propensity to develop autoimmune conditions.
When you look around, when you look around in society all around, I mean, I see it everywhere.
Yep.
Now
It's
that
like
once you
the
see it, you
scales are
can't
coming out the
unsee it.
eyes. Yes.
Yeah, that's a big thing that I notice right away is people is the first thing I'll notice is people's gaze. If their gaze is a little uncertain, if it's a little bit off kilter, they're not looking straight at you, they're looking past your ears a lot of the time. That's Mercury. And the kids, little kids, like a little child is supposed to be full of energy, curiosity, and glowing with prana and chi, and then you see these little kids like in their strollers and their poor parents, and there's so much of it that everybody thinks, well, that's just the way kids are.
They want to cope. They don't want to fix it.
Well, yes.
They want to identify with it and then cope with it and not fix it.
But they don't know how, Brittany.
Oh no, they don't want to accept the fact that something happened somewhere at some point in their child's development, whether it was in utero or at the doctor's office, that they need to go back and fix now. There's a lot of denial, I think, in this world. All the people that I've tried to share, with that could have really benefited.
Possible to get people to listen, yeah. Isn't
I
it?
think you've probably got a mix of things, just unawareness. I mean, before I knew anything about it, the only thing you can do is cope. If you think,
yeah,
this is just how my child is. I made accommodations for my oldest. There was a 5-minute warning, a 2-minute warning, a 1-minute warning, and there were still the super predictable meltdowns at the playground when it was time to leave. And then I see other kids, somebody just says, hey, let's go. And the kids just go, yeah. And they start running. And it's like, oh my God, how do you do that? And, so it's like, well, transitions are hard when you're on the spectrum, when your brain is just, okay, I'm on my track. Let me, and
my youngest son is starting to do that. My youngest son is finally starting to connect those dots. That's like, we're in transition right now where, we can go play at the playground. I'm like, okay, we're going to leave now. And he'll tell me no. And then 1 minute later, he's running to the car. Or if I tell him I need to go run an errand, please get your shoes and whatever toy collection you need to bring. And he's like, no. And then he gathers it up and we leave anyways. It's wild.
He has to tell you no, but then he complies.
No, because no is a newer word for him. He never understood what the word no meant. And so once he realized that it was a preference, oh my goodness. Do you want this? No.
And there's a whole stage of no, but much younger children. So he skipped that stage and is doing it now, you think?
Yeah.
Well, I like to think that he's like maybe 2.5 to 3 years old in his mind.
Oh.
I kind of feel like I had this theory with my oldest son. When we go out and we play with homeschool friends, he clings to like 6 to 7 year olds. And so in my mind, I feel like maybe he is 6 to 7 in his social skills. So he's clinging to those children.
Yeah. Well, 1 year is just beginning in this game.
Yeah.
You will see a lot of improvement like Sandra did. My kids missed all this stuff. I mean, I still think, oh, they could sure use a little chelation every now and then. but they, they missed all the heavy duty poisoning that.
I think our environment has gotten
I'm so
progressively
grateful that I didn't have
worse
to do
over the
that.
past few decades, where it's like reaching a tipping point where it's not just 1 in 10 kids, it's 1 in 2 kids has some weird ailment as a
How
child.
bad it has to get before anybody realizes, before people say, hey,
There's an
apparently it has to get
environmental factor.
pretty damn bad. Yeah, it has to get pretty
It's
damn
not all genetics. It can't be. There are no genetic epidemics. It doesn't work that way. Yeah.
Of course not.
People,
Sort of like,
kids with arthritis, with, just what we used to think of diseases of aging and runaway inflammation. I'm like, allergies even. I remember when I was a kid, allergies was the big thing. And now it's not just allergies. It's not just the hay fever, the big allergy. It's the food allergies that
Yeah,
are,
it's a whole
debilitating and really restricting what they can have. So it's like we've added to the pile, and like you guys said, because there's so many kids with this, it
I've
seems
been
normalizing it in parents' eyes that you just cope with it. Yeah.
I've been noticing recently, and this just broke my heart, the other day. I've been noticing a lot in young adults because they're the ones that got the, the thimerosal blast, and they're just coming into college now, or they're just getting out of college. And they're getting out of college now, and they're entering the workforce. Like a bunch of them can't hold a job because they're so messed up. So I saw one the other day at a family gathering, this great big kid, and he's with tall, no muscle tone, dead white with acne, bent over like this and stuck with his father everywhere. And my daughter told me, well, they're trying to get him a job. The parents were fine, they missed all this, think, he'll be okay if he gets a job, but he gets anxiety attacks before he goes to get the job, and then he can't show up for the job and suffers from such bad anxiety that he can't work. And yeah, it just broke my heart when I see it. It's horrible.
That's where my 12-year-old's going if we don't
That's
fix
where
it.
he was gonna go. Yeah, yeah. And you got to get them young because like they listen. They have to do what you tell them. When they're big, they're not gonna do it. You have to persuade them to do it.
Yeah, I still have the the upper hand in this. It's not an option. None of this is an option. I don't deal in that, letting kids make their choices. Like there's no options here. This is what we're doing for the rest of your life. This is the rest of your life's livelihood.
Probably,
You're
possibly.
going to be unhealthy for the rest of your life, and you're going to suffer for the rest of your life unless we do this. That's just it.
That's just it. And they've seen that that's true, huh? At least the big one.
Yeah, they do. They understand, and they get to watch me, and I tell them, these are the things that I feel, and this is why I'm doing it, and these are the things that you're going through, and this is why we're doing it for you. And then my smallest kid is the example of why we're doing this, and everyone sees it, and it makes sense to them. He can be like this forever, or he can get better, and I think we all have the opportunity to get better, so we're all going to do it together. And my husband sits on the sidelines, confused and lost, and he doesn't get a choice or any say because he wants to be, one of the people, the doubters, and I'm like, I'm sorry, I'm not going to put anybody's health, I'm not going to discount any of this just because you're uncertain. If I'm certain, then I'm going with it because
you go, Brittany. So you think we've talked enough? Let's save something for the next time. Anything else you'd like to add, Brittany? You're supposed to be the one. I'm impressed by your, your confidence and how you're handling this.
Thank you. It's not easy.
You were like that, I wish everybody.
I had this thought of when people say something to me along those lines. I'm like, I'm a mom. Who else would do this? Like,
exactly.
Like
such a wuss.
Doctor's telling me, oh no, your kid's just, oh, he's a boy. They talk late, and I'm thinking, okay, these people aren't helping. I am the one to help. I'm going to figure this out. I'm going to do this. Like, get out of my way kind of a thing. And
Well,
I
what was it
remember my
about
husband.
looking at the material that made you believe that this was what you had to do? I mean, you know, I've been searching, this is for myself, I was searching all over and, you know, I tried this, tried that, you know, all kinds of stuff. And when I got that book, it was like, when I got amalgam illness, you know, it was like, oh, you know, there was something there. This is it.
This was my only stop. I wasn't, this was the first thing I was introduced to. And all I had to do was, you know, read the book and see the science. And I'm like, sold, fine, you know, let's go. And I'm glad I didn't have to go through making big mistakes like I've seen some people make with, you know, IV chelation, chlorella, and all of those things.
All those things. And what about you, Sandra? Did you make any mistakes at the beginning? Or did you right into this the right
I
way?
did make a mistake at the beginning. I came to it thinking, oh, the gluten-free, dairy-free diet is the
Yes.
best I can do for my kid, just avoiding
Yeah.
what causes a problem. And then when I learned about mercury knocking out the DPP4 enzyme, that enzyme production, I was like, oh, so avoiding those things cuts down on the GI distress and the immune reaction stuff. So of course it makes sense that it would help. But then if you remove the mercury and the gluten enzyme, I mean the DPP4 production can resume, then you're helping the body to tolerate more foods. I'm like, wow, this is like, that was the first big connection for me. And it was more, I'm glad with my timing of when I learned about chelation, because there were some things over the years where people threw shade on it for, you know, a person misrepresenting that she was a mother, but she was a non-custodial grandparent,
The
but
evil.
very adept at, you know, knows so much about chelation and gave good information, but so much obfuscating who this child was, to where the point where people questioned, was this child even autistic, and did it really all happen like this?
For some
It
reason,
threw so
spit
much, I
drinking
mean, it just made so many people doubt. You know, they trusted this one person and her story that was so glowing, and then
turned out it
come to
wasn't.
find out she was a fraud. That really rocked parents' confidence.
Yeah, that
But
was.
like I said, I came after that, and I had already started chelating, and I saw the progress. So I'm like, it's staring me in the face what this is doing. Like, I cannot deny this. My kid's no longer toe walking. That was the first big thing. He was calmer and happier altogether. So his mental health came up. Nothing else changed in our environment, right? It was the chelation. I mean, that was the only thing that we changed, and boom, within 3 months I had a different kid. And we even took a long break off in the summer, because I think I was the one who was exhausted with the nighttime waking up, and I'm like, okay, we're taking a little bit of a break. um and so, and then when we resumed, there were more, you know, more progress along the way. I'm like, yeah, we got to keep going. When the dump phase hit, I knew we had to keep going. This is like a keep the faith moment. And then when I myself started chelating, and it was the same thing, I'm like, okay, Sandra, you know what to do. You got to keep the faith. You just got to keep trudging. It was, yeah.
Fudge is a word I often use in this context. So I think a message here is that, you know, trust yourself. And you always say, don't take your kids back to the same people who poisoned them in the first place, and trust yourself. Yeah. And just trudge away at this thing, and you'll get your kids back from lead, mercury, from arsenic, whatever the hell it is. And it's the mercury that keeps them retaining all the other bad stuff that's out there, the PCBs and the forever chemicals,
Arsenic, aluminum,
endocrine disruptors too. Well, all those weird plastic ones that, you know, that mimic estrogen, right? Yeah.
Think of the liver we think of as this big detoxifying organ, right? It breaks down the fat soluble stuff into more toxic things to make them water soluble and get them ready for excretion.
Right.
But then mercury accumulates in the liver too. And when I think of all kinds of grumpy people and severely angry people, it's not necessarily just lead. It's a lot of times it's that cynical, mean, depressed, grumpy. That to me is Mercury. And I'm like, that's
Well,
that's
well
what
known in
people,
all
that's the
these.
liver toxicity thing coming out. It's just, you can see it in their faces. And I'm not talking yellow eyes. I'm talking just the scowling, the lines up here between the eyebrows where it's like,
Or the color
I
comes
don't want to
back.
be near you. I know you're angry. I can just see it on your face. Even if you're happy right now, you have these lines there, like, young 20-year-old people with this scowling, I can't even make the face. And then there's another one where it's just a stuck like a needle of destiny thing.
I wish I knew
That's
how
a
to
big
tell
one
people.
too, where it's like your liver is damaged, like something took a beating there.
Yeah.
So many things to see. But yeah, there's hope. You can do something about it.
Yeah, well, if you get
Absolutely.
people to listen and to realize that, that's not just the way they are. You're meant to be happy. You're meant to be able to digest your food. You're meant to be able to not get sick all the time. You're meant to be, cheerful. They're supposed to be a cheerful and some joy in
Feel
life.
safe in your own body.
Yes. Okay, well,
Your nervous system isn't just always on edge.
Okay, I'm gonna close this now and do all the work of posting it, everything. Hold on, let me figure out how you do this. Pause, stop